There you go, as that voice tells you, the recording is now in progress. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Welcome to the Roundtable. As the chair of the Young Fabians, we'll be hearing from our fantastic Young Fabian candidates running for office as Labour candidates across Britain on May 5th. They've proven themselves to be dedicated activists and leaders, and if elected as councillors, they'll have the opportunities to improve their communities through their powers and advocacy. Tonight, we'll discuss their experiences of campaigning as a young person, canvassing during a pandemic, why they're running, how we can support them, and advice for anybody watching who is considering running in an election in future. In terms of any other housekeeping, again, please feel free to put your messages in the chat and ask any questions throughout the session as well. The format of this is we're going to be doing a little bit of a Q&A and then we can get round to your questions later on in the session as well. We're now going to go around each of our candidates who have joined us for an introduction where they'll talk about why they're running for office and their involvement in Labour and the Young Fabians and where they're running for office as well. And I'm going to start with Cai.
Thank you. My name's Cai and I'm standing in Runnymede for the Borough Council in a little place called Enfield Green. It's quite a unique ward because it's where lots of students live. So we might stand a good chance. But I joined the Fabians about a year ago. I believe it was actually Panny who sort of introduced me to that. And I've been having a good time since. I got involved in standing to be a councillor because I've grown up having to care for my father who's disabled, and I saw how much help that good councillors and a good council can be in situations like that. So it sort of inspired me, I guess you could say. But thank you very much for inviting me to take part in this.
Thank you so much, Cai. And then we will go to Panny next.
Hi everyone, my name's Panny and I'm standing in Highgate in Camden. Highgate is a very interesting ward because when people say the word Highgate, those who know London will think big mansions, lots of very kind of well-off people, lots of celebrities, but the reality couldn't be further than the truth. Within Highgate, we have some of the richest communities in Camden, as well as some of the poorest. And that kind of contrast between sort of rich and poor almost on each other's doorstep makes it a very unique and interesting place to campaign in, and also means that the needs of different constituents are very, very different. And you have to be kind of receptive to those needs when you're speaking to people on the doorstep. In terms of the Young Fabians, I joined a couple of years ago now and have been heavily involved ever since. I was the international co-chair last year, as well as a policy officer for the Devolution and Local Government Network. This year, I am the international and outreach officer for the Young Fabians, as well as our Young European Socialist Bureau member. I'm also a policy officer for the new Housing and Infrastructure Network, which I proposed we set up at our last AGM. So,
thanks very much, Panny. That's fantastic. And we'll go next to Nicki, if that's okay.
Hi everybody, my name is Nicki. I am running for office in a ward called Ponders End, which is in the London Borough of Enfield, which is in northeast London. In terms of my wider involvement with the party, I joined about 6 years ago, the party, and been involved in London Young Labour. Got involved in my local CLP, was able to get onto the exec and was able to use that way to engage with local councillors and RMP and obviously the wider membership. In terms of my involvement with the Young Fabians, I'm currently on the YF exec as the women's officer. And the reason I'm running in the elections is because essentially I've seen the work that the Labour administration have done in the borough that I live in, and I also want to see more representation of people who look like me, so more women, more young women, more women of colour, and more Black women, and I decided I'd be the change I want to see.
I love that, Nicki, and I think that is amazing. And we're going to go next to Thomas, if that's okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Wonderful. So, hi everyone, I'm Thomas. I'm running in a place called Upper Edmonton in N18 in the London borough of Enfield. It's where I was born. It happens to be one of the most deprived wards in the United Kingdom, so there's lots of challenges there. I'm also the chair of the Young Fabians Law Network. I've been a member of the Fabians for 5 years and a member of the Labour Party since the ancient era of Ed Miliband when I was a teenager. But yeah, I felt like I was ready. And this is something I think every young person ought to hear. It doesn't matter. Your age shouldn't define your ability to be able to speak up for your community and advocate for others. I got involved politically because I heard you mention earlier, Cai, your disabled father. My brother's also disabled and he's depended on public services growing up, and Labour's the natural home to protect public services and ensure vulnerable people aren't left behind, particularly after 12 years of Conservative policies that do nothing but discriminate the most vulnerable in our society. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Thomas. And yeah, completely agree. I think so many societies have been let down by the current Conservative government. And it's so important we have, people like yourselves running to make sure we can kind of set right what they've done across the last 16 years or so. And going to go next to Ellie.
Hello, I'm Ellie Ormsby and I'm the Labour and Cooperative, apologies, there's an ambulance outside. Excellent. So yeah, I'm Ellie Ormsby and I'm the Labour and Cooperative candidate in Lancaster Gate, which is a target ward in the city of Westminster. In terms of my Labour experience, I've been a member of the Labour Party for over 10 years and I joined before I could even vote, and I've been a pretty much dedicated activist ever since. Nevertheless, I am relatively new to the Young Fabians. And I'm standing for election, firstly, because I wanted to play my part in turfing out the truly just awful and heinous Conservative administration here in Westminster. And secondly, from a more personal perspective, I wanted to learn a bit more about the role of local government and how I could run a good campaign, and thought this would be a good opportunity to do that.
Fantastic, thank you, Ellie. And then we'll go next to Ryan.
Thanks, Laura. So I'm Ryan Jude. I'm also running in Lancaster Gate Ward with Ellie here in Westminster City Council. I decided to get involved, very similar to Thomas actually. So growing up, my brother was autistic, relied a lot on the services that he got from the council. I volunteered a lot growing up with my brother and also with a lot of other communities up in Stockport where I grew up. And I saw firsthand the impact that budget cuts had on not just the individuals, but their families and the people who looked after them. And you look at that as a Labour member and you think that's not okay. What can I do to help? Since moving to London, which is almost a decade ago now, similar issues here in Westminster. We're one of the richest boroughs, one of the richest local councils in the entire country. The biggest contributions to UK GDP from any council comes from Westminster, yet 30% of people here are still in poverty. And that's because of the Conservative council that it's been since inception. So I've got involved to try and flip that and finally get a council that works for the residents.
Fantastic, thank you, Ryan. And then next to Kashmire.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, everybody. I'm Kashmire, a hawker running in the Techno Regis ward here in the city of Wolverhampton. Techno Regis, just for a bit of context, is the second safest Conservative ward in the city. So I know that there's a bit of a challenge, but having run in its neighbour, the safest Tory part of the city last year in Techno Whittick, I'm very much up for it. The ward is home to lots of important green space, which our Labour administration very much wants to protect. As well as it being a bit of a cultural melting pot, not least due to thanks to the place which in the last few years has hosted a Grand Slam of darts, whilst our famous Civic Hall has been redone up. But despite saying all that, and despite its wealth and its some of the long driveways, there are very much pockets right throughout Regis, which has people who are sadly like me, who have struggled through life on a lower income. So the reason of wanting to run is to obviously therefore represent them, to also therefore be a voice and a councillor who actually is able to do stuff as part of the ruling Labour administration, which has been in office since I think December 2010 here. And also give and hopefully as well ensure that younger people like myself are involved, not least knowing that the average age of a councillor as of a few years ago is 59, and his name was John Smith. That has to change as time goes by. I joined the Labour Party in 2015, have been pretty much involved in all sorts of stuff here in Wolverhampton, and when I was a student at Sheffield Hallam, but more recently joined the Fabians in about I think 2021, and I'm now just began the fun of being a social media officer for West Midlands, and also finally as a cooperative member and as a Labour cooperative candidate for the ward I've mentioned. Obviously cooperation in a time like this, not least thanks to COVID plus all sorts of other issues, it makes it very important to me.
Fantastic, thank you. And then we'll go next to Mark Storm.
Hi everybody. Marcus Storm. I'm standing for Fortune Green Ward in Camden, which is right at the northwest edge of North London. So it is a big mixed ward. It's got, as many of you have said, right, for example, Panny and Highgate has said, Highgate is also, it's got some rich areas and some very deprived areas. Fortune Green is much the same. So in the east of the ward, you've got some very middle class areas, and but then you have quite a bit of deprivation on the estates, which are people you can actually help as a councillor, and that's probably what's been the most rewarding thing about it. I grew up in various different parts of the UK, including Wolverhampton and other places in the Midlands, and mainly Edinburgh. But I really didn't know what the councils did when I was a kid. When I moved to Camden, I just found the council so different in the way it operates. There seemed to be so much stuff going on, and even with challenges which I thought were so big as to be national challenges, like the climate crisis, Camden has been innovating on the front lines and has, for example, issued its own green bond, which is a kind of way to raise money to plant more trees and to install electric car charging points locally. So that's really what made me stand this time, because I thought, if we don't get this right in 22 to 26, right, that's the term we're looking at, our planet's stuffed. So I hope everybody here, I know everybody here will also be taking the big challenges like the climate crisis seriously, and we'll put that to use when elected. With regards to the Young Fabians, I've been a party member also since the Miliband years, which seems like very, very long time ago. I joined the YF, I think, during COVID, had a bit of time, and mainly spent my time in technology network, broadened it out to include defence, and then kind of started doing that for the entire Fabian Society, not just the YF. But it is a fantastic place, and I think the YF is a very good place for learning about how to do politics, because it teaches you one of the most fundamental skills, which is how to organize things. And organization, definitely from what I see, wins campaigns. Right? I have now experience it in many different places and across the party, and I can say this hand on heart, the YF is such an organized place, which makes it so good for you, right, as a YF member, but also good for the party as a whole, because if you want to do stuff, you basically if somebody says they're going to do something, they'll do it, which is kind of the building block of any organisation.
Thank you very much, Mark. And we'll go next to Finley.
Thanks, Laura. My name is Finley Harnett. I'm running as one of 3 Labour candidates in Pinner South in the London Borough of Harrow, which is in the northwest of London. I've been a Labour Party member since 2015. I work for a Labour Member of Parliament since 2020. In terms of the Fabian Society, I joined last year, and within 24 hours of joining, I somehow became co-chair of London Young Fabians. So I got very involved very quickly. I'm also a policy officer for the Arts and Culture Network. So yeah, I'm also chair of Harrow West Young Labour. So those are all the positions I hold. The reason I'm running in Pinner South, it's my home ward. It usually votes Conservative. I sense a real dissatisfaction with Johnson this time round and his failure to deal with the cost of living crisis and Partygate. I think there are a lot of decent people in Pinner South who are not happy with that, and they're not happy with Johnson's candidates failing to call the Prime Minister out for Partygate. So I think I want to play my part in making sure we turf out Johnson on May the 6th, the day after. So if we win, it would be a miracle. Like, it would be an uphill struggle, I'm aware. But if we did win, then yeah, I'd be very pleased. So yeah.
Well thought. Thank you very much, Finley. And then last but not least, we'll go to Liam.
Thanks, Laura. Hi, everyone. My name is Liam Martin Lane, and I'm standing for King's Cross ward. You've heard Panny introduce you to the northeast of Camden. You've had Marcus introduce you to the northwest of Camden. Well, it's a pleasure to introduce you to the south of Camden. And just like Panny and Marcus's wards, King's Cross is incredibly diverse in terms of its population and also in terms of its local issues. Residential estates border retail hotspots, multinational companies are a stone's throw away from small startups in the area. There is a lot going on. And part of my reason for running is I want to ensure that the benefits of what there is to offer in the area and the really, really good work that Camden's Labour Council is doing is felt by as many people as possible who actually live there in the area. I mean, my experience of the Labour Party, I joined basically 6 months before the 2015 general election, and since then I've met some fantastic people, both within Young Labour, within the Young Fabians. But my experience in the Labour Party so far has been one of local success but national defeat. And part of my purpose for running is I want to see that change. I've experienced, and my family has experienced, the benefit of the education, the economic stability which Labour brought about when in office, and we've seen how that has been wrenched away under the Conservatives. But I joined the Labour Party because I knew it wasn't as angry as I could get with the Tories. It wasn't enough. I can't get them out on my own. I need to be part of a large collective of people to really work and organise to win elections in order to do that. And part of that is winning back the people's trust. And I really want to show both in this election and through my time as a councillor that Labour are the party that can be trusted to really deliver for ordinary people on the ground. My experience with the Young Fabians, I am one of these come for the boat party, stay for the politics members of the Young Fabians. So I remember my first ever Fabians event was in 2017, and that was a boat party. And since then, I've just kept coming back and kept getting involved in events in the Young Fabians and the Fabian Society more widely. I enjoy the policy discussion, I enjoy the debate, and something I suppose over the last 2 years that hasn't been stated enough. I also enjoy the socialising. I enjoy getting to meet a really, really diverse group of other members from all different parts of the country, and it's really, really good to see the Young Fabians and the Fabian Society regionalising in the way that it has done over the past couple of years. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion ahead, and thanks very much once again for having me.
Thanks very much, Liam. And I think it's very interesting. A lot of you have kind of outlined similar reasons for running and sort of also experiences across the Young Fabians as well. And obviously we're really keen to support you in everything that you're doing as candidates to make your communities better. So in terms of the questions, we're going to ask a few questions at sort of 3 to 4 candidates. Obviously we'd like to get around everybody of every question, but there's quite a few of us. So going to kick off by asking, how have you selected relevant campaign issues to run on? And what was your thought process behind this selection? And I'm going to go to Ellie first on this, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So we're coming from a position of permanent opposition here in Westminster. So based on the kind of demographics of our area, our campaign is focused on setting a narrative that A, discredits the current Tory incumbent, and B, removes perceived barriers from voting Labour for the first time, as well as obviously mobilising our core Labour vote and squeezing our Lib Dem and Green left-leaning voters. So given that, we focused on 3 core campaign issues to reflect who we need to target. First being Tory incumbent incompetence. Just like at the national government level, we've got a really tired Tory administration here, which has become complacent and arrogant in some of their decision making. So we've been really trying to drive that message home on the doorstep. And our local Conservatives here handed us a massive gift last year when they built the Marble Arch Mound with public money. And that is the perfect physical embodiment of their incompetence and poor judgment. So the mound is on literally all of our campaign materials. We constantly compare the cost of the mound to what else you could have bought. So for example, school supplies for 35,000 children. That message really, really lands on the doorstep and really challenges the preconception that the Tories are the only people who can be trusted with your money, because they've just proven that they can't. The second related campaign issue we focus in on a lot is the cost of living crisis. So our local Tories like to really, really pride themselves on having the lowest council tax in the country, and constantly try and scaremonger that Labour, if they were in power, would raise the rates. So we've promised a council tax freeze, and similarly have that on all our materials and mention that in every voter conversation we possibly can. And we've really been trying to link that to the broader kind of national cost of living crisis, and kind of saying, you know, Labour's the only one with a real plan. And the final kind of bucket of campaign issues we really focus on are kind of green issues. We have a really strong Green and Lib Dem vote here in Westminster, and we've really been trying to usurp them on kind of green and environmental issues with the launch of our Green New Deal for Westminster, and also have accompanied that with lots and lots of messaging saying that, you know, the Green and the Lib Dems are a wasted vote here in Westminster, as they'll never ever win. There's never been a Lib Dem councillor here in our 50-year history, for example. But I won't steal all of Ryan's sandwiches, because I'm sure you probably want to talk a lot about our Green New Deal for Westminster. But those are our kind of 3 core campaign issues we're using here in Westminster based on the kind of voters we're trying to target.
Definitely, and I think on that, I'll go to Ryan next as well to talk a bit more about the environmental focus as well, which I think is a really important lens for which we can make sure we're getting through to voters. So Ryan, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, cheers, Laura. So obviously with where we are at the minute with the climate crisis, with our net zero targets, we've been very keen to highlight how important local authorities are in delivering on this. So just for context, here in Westminster, the Conservative Council declared a climate emergency in 2019, but only after we pushed them for years. They very reluctantly finally did it. And since then, there's been an awful lot of rhetoric, a lot of flashy press releases and videos saying that they're doing stuff, but really they're just tinkering around the edges. And at the same time, you know, the world is slowly burning, but in the local area, there are very specific issues, such as over 50% of schools in Westminster have illegally high air pollution levels outside them. And that was an audit done by the council themselves. With the cost of living crisis now, with the energy price cap going up, it was the failure of the council to retrofit our social housing stock, which has meant that this is hitting people's bills. It's really impacting people's bottom line. So we were very keen very early on to make it clear that climate was at the heart of everything that we're doing and everything that we're speaking about. So as Ellie said, we published our Green New Deal for Westminster document back in November. In this, we really pressed home how systemic we were going to be on climate. So introducing a cabinet member for climate action to show that we're serious about this, we're going to be accountable on it, introducing a net zero test. So all council decisions have to go past this to look at the emissions impact, to look at the impact on local people. And also one that Mark's already touched on, issuing local climate bonds and local finance to help residents get involved in this as we actually implement it. And then the final big systemic one is a citizens' assembly. So telling residents that we're not doing any of this to you, we're doing it with you. And I think that's the most important thing. So in terms of our messaging on this, we've been really keen to highlight the opportunities that this represents. So what I talked about the schools, it's saying we will improve your air quality, we'll improve your child's quality of life, we'll improve the number of green spaces in the area, not just making the air more pleasant, but also making the actual place more pleasant to live in. So really hammering those home is what we've been doing, because it's important to not only therefore squeeze the Greens and the Lib Dems, but also to show a lot of Tory voters that if this is the issue which you care the most about, which the vast majority of people do care the most about, you want to vote for us. Final piece on this is that the government's net zero strategy said that over 82% of the country's emissions are within the scope of influence of local councils. We've been very, very keen to make sure people realise this, that it's not just hot air when we talk about on green policies. This is how we solve the national problem as well.
Definitely. And I think that point about making sure that we're doing things with rather than to is a really important point as well. I'm also going to go to Cai on that question as well, if that's okay, about how you've selected relevant campaign issues to run on and your kind of thought process behind that selection.
No worries. I think the important thing to understand about my ward is that it is a roughly 30 to 40% students, which is a huge advantage, you'd think, for a Labour candidate. But in the last election, because we do our elections in thirds here, only 7% turnout came from the student halls of residence. So a large part of our campaign is trying to get students out to vote. And we've been trying to think outside the box about how we do that. But a lot of the argument here is whether students and residents who aren't students, whether they can sort of coexist in this rather leafy part of Surrey where house prices are quite high. So big things we're talking about is parking, and how the college, when it builds new residential developments for students, doesn't consider the impact that that's really going to have on the surrounding community. So we talk about that a bit. But I think the issues that really get through to people here who are largely middle class are, the very personal ones about their potholes or the traffic outside. And I find that really works a lot. And on top of that, the council have been cutting services here, such as the school buses around here. But they've also then voted to give themselves a pay rise. And I find that really, reaches people quite a lot. So our party policy this election is to freeze our pay at £4,000 a year. And then any extra that we do get, we give back to the community to help kids get free school meals and to help fund school uniforms in the area too. So those are our big main ones, I think.
Thank you very much. And I think a lot of those issues are so important, as you say, as well, making sure that we are giving back to the community and that funding is allocated properly, rather than, as Ellie and Ryan talked about, using it on a Marble Arch mound and all sorts of things. So I'm going to go to Nicki next for the last response to that question before we move on to the next one. So I'll go next to Nicki, to you, to talk about how you selected the campaign issues that you're running on in Enfield.
So essentially what we've tried to do in Enfield is try to, it sounds like very stereotypical, but basically listen to what the residents want. So in Enfield, the Labour have been in control of council for 12 years. And in that time, we have, we've done our best to combat the, the austerity that we've come under with the administration. We've, had an obscene amount of money cut from our budget councils. But even with that in mind, we are still, trying to make sure that Enfield is a pleasant place to live. It's predominantly, it is quite a suburban area, so we do have quite a lot of people who have, families, young children there, but we also have quite a young population as well. And there's been, in my ward in particular, there's been like regeneration going on, because obviously done its bit in order to make it a more pleasant place to live for the local community, but has also, a new demographic has moved into the area. So, our focus has been on things like we've introduced a free bulky waste collection to try and combat the issue of fly tipping. And we've also been buckling down on introducing CCTV into hotspots, so that if people, and we've got a very good reporting system now, so if people spot fly tipping and they report it to the council, then it gets picked up within a few hours, just to try and make sure that it's a nice place to live, because it's not very nice when you walk down the road and you see an old pram or an old mattress or something under the tree at the end of your street. It's just not very pleasant. We are doing our bit to combat the cost of living crisis as well. So this year we have frozen council tax in order to try and support our residents. And the other things that we're looking at are building affordable homes for local people. We've got a lot of new builds have been built, particularly in my ward, have been built or in the process of being built as well, to try and make sure that it is an affordable place to live. We've also got quite a bit of social housing as well. We had the mayor of London come down in the last fortnight or so, just to have a look at the building which has gone on in Enfield. It's obviously brilliant. And as I previously said, because we do have quite a lot of families, we've got a lot of primary schools, a lot of secondary schools, so we're doing our bit in terms of school streets, which has meant that it's been reduced traffic at school gates, it keeps the air clean, and it keeps the children safe as well, so that there's, it reduces the chances of them, having some kind of motor incident while they're on their way to school. And it's also just nice when you see parents walking their children to school, parents tend to congregate at the gates and have those kind of little conversations which they might not have had the opportunity to have if they just dropped their kid off, the kid just jumped out of the car and then just went into school. So those are all the kind of little things that we're doing to just make sure that the area is a more pleasant place to live, and it's policies that I'm proud to run on.
Fantastic, thank you, Nicki. And I think all of those points are so important as well. And you can kind of sense, as you say, tap into what is going to be most important for your community to make sure you're kind of reflecting those issues back at them. Want to move on now to talking about how your actual campaigns are going so far, and also the sort of reaction you've received so far from your local community. So Liam, I'm going to go to you first on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, so it's interesting to actually try and assess this and to answer this, because I think probably other candidates might agree. As a first time candidate, it doesn't necessarily matter whether you're standing in an area that's constituted safe or marginal or unwinnable. You want to kind of like knock it out of the park and do as best as you can. And in purely electoral / party terms, the biggest challenge that we've got in King's Cross is voter apathy and low turnout. This is a solid Labour ward, but I'm not treating it like it, because you are no less entitled to visible active local representation from your councillors and from your Member of Parliament, regardless of where you live. And if you have a look at the results of the last election in Camden, even though Labour won quite comfortably here in King's Cross, we had the lowest turnout in the entire borough in 2018. We were the only ward to have a turnout of less than 30%. And you can blame demographics and population makeup for that to an extent. But I've wanted to really kind of correct that by saying that we are active, we are local, we are here to represent you on the issues that matter to you. And on that level, we've had a really good response on the doorstep. In terms of issues, the one issue that does primarily come up is that of housing. not just kind of like housing affordability and the quantity of homes that can be built, but also the quality of them as well. When you've got so many families, I think in Camden we have about 6,500 families currently on a council housing waiting list, and it's good that our manifesto in Camden and something that I'm really trying to put across on that, as well as the cost of living, which is really uppermost in people's minds at the moment, is striking home quite well. And so, yeah, in that respect, the response from the local community has been really, really good. But yeah, to kind of like complete the circle, I haven't even allowed myself to even say to myself, "Oh, you've won. It's a shoe-in. This brilliant. You're over the line," because I think that it's very, very dangerous to kind of like carry that attitude into the council chamber with you. So regardless of how safe or unwinnable, how marginal my seat is, I'm going to be giving it everything right up to 10 o'clock on polling day.
I think that's absolutely a fantastic attitude to have as well, Liam, and very much, as you say, making sure you're looking at that campaign from a holistic perspective. I'm going to go next to Kashmire, if that's okay.
Yes, for me, it's been a bit of an odd one from the perspective of I wasn't initially planning to run in 2022 as a result of the business of my job, which for the record is with the Commonwealth Games Organising Committee. So things are getting into full swing. So I was asked to take on the baton as of such. To run for the party, so it's meant obviously having had a few trying to get the motions in gear from an internal perspective, but there are dates in the diary for me to be getting out campaigning, which will probably more towards the end of the month. However, though, I very much think the use of digital campaigning is going to be very important. I note that from what I did last year, there was huge engagement through say Facebook, for example, and that'll be one thing I'll be going absolutely heavily on before then getting out on the doors with a massive load of leaflets, then hopefully a couple of door knocks in between. But I very much do think that there is a different feeling from the speaking to colleagues across the city, not least in part, I think, thanks to the cost of living crisis, which is just which to affect a city like us, which has got some of the poorest areas within it. In fact, it's got the one of our wards, Bushby South and Low Hill, has one of the lowest electoral turnouts in the country, and in fact is the highest has the highest fuel poverty rate in the country. So it does obviously illustrate very much people are being hit already. And I only suspect, only suspect that with the way in which things are, it's only going to get even worse. And that'll be that will very much be what I take out onto the doorstep, and whether it is in person or virtually or through the social media posts, that is going to be the plan. Knowing that I live in a city which gets a ridiculed fair amount as a result of the kind of mix of people that there are, and I don't see that to be. And I honestly feel that to be a really saddening part of it all. But that's where we come in, and obviously be as positive as we can and be like, this is a change that we can offer you. And obviously, therefore, being as supportive as we can, not just in regards to that, particularly for those on, say, lower income backgrounds where we're aiming to engage and support those. Not least for those who need a better Wi-Fi and access to the web, which within the ward understanding is very much the case, as it stretches from a bit to the city centre to towards South Staffordshire and the countryside. But then also other things of accessibility and all sorts of others. So I'm looking forward to really getting dug into the next few weeks. But there's very much, I think, a feeling as to people and not being pretty tired and a bit fed up of the Conservatives.
Definitely, and I think that point as well that you made, Kashmire, about digital exclusion is something that's really important. And I know the Fabian Society actually have published a report about that, I think, this week. So definitely anyone on the call, do check that out as well. And we're going to go next to Finley with the same question, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. So Pinner South is a sort of area where political candidates don't generally do any canvassing or leafleting. But I want to change that. I want to get out there. I want to talk to as many people as possible. So I think people have been pleasantly surprised to see Labour leaflets and to see us on the doorstep. And in my experience, I've spoken to many people who were previously Conservative, now they're not sure, or they're willing to lend us their support. I'm trying to get them to kind of lend us their vote as a sort of one-off message to Johnson, while reassuring them that I will actually be a strong councillor that kind of stands up for their interests and for the interests of local business in Pinner South. I've also met various different kind of organisations and groups that are already doing great work in Pinner. Yesterday I was at Harrow Boxing Club, sort of talking to them, finding out what kind of services and activities they provide to the local community. Friends of Yedding Walk, that's another group that maintains the brook that runs through the ward. So I think the reaction that I've had is one that's been sort of pleasantly surprised and positive, and people, yeah, are kind of happy to talk to me. So yeah, it's been a good experience. I've enjoyed it.
Definitely, and I think that's something that's really important as well, as you say, Finley, to make sure you're kind of getting those connections with people and that you are being able to sort of have that experience. And I think that leads quite well into the next question that I was going to ask. And so one of our Young Fabians themes of the year is, what does a Labour Britain look like for young people? And obviously, I think that will involve lots of young people like yourselves being in office at every level. So I wanted to ask some of you, what inspired you to run for office, and also what's been the most rewarding experience of your campaign so far? And I was going to go to Marcus on that, if that's okay.
Yeah, so as I said in my intro, Laura, the real impact that councils have is pretty intense, right? And I have a campaign blog which you can check. I can send the link, but I'm talking about casework and things I'm helping with neighbours in my neighbourhood, because I live right next to the ward. And one, you know, of course, it's stuff like there's a broken street lamp, but if you're kind of innovative and you want to put the energy into it, you can put together a proposal to turn that into an electric car charging point. Or it could be something as simple as, or simple in a procedural sense, such as there was a woman down my road who was living in a council-owned property, and she had a moldy bedroom for 5 years, since 2017 or something, and her son was just, you know, living in this rising damp caused mold bedroom, and got that fixed in about a week and a half, and that made me really happy, right? You even, it doesn't have to, you don't have to solve climate change to make a real difference, and that was a good memory, good experience. So there you go.
Thank you very much, Mark. And I think, as you say, sometimes as well, I suppose those changes that might seem small, but it's really important in terms of that wider positive change. If somebody in your community feels like they took an issue to you and a difference was made that was positive to their lives as a result of it. And I'm going to go to Thomas next to ask the same question, if that's okay.
Sure. Well, first of all, I think people enter politics for many different reasons, and especially young people. One thing we love to do most is meet new people and congregate in spaces. And one of the best things I'm finding is the ability to meet new people without an excuse. Basically, you can go anywhere in your ward, be that a youth club or a pub or any kind of public event. You can just walk around and introduce yourself, and immediately you just build a conversation, and you realize that's how you discover what people are concerned about the most. So through that simple thing that young people love doing most, puts us in very good stead. And one thing I'd like to add is Upper Edmonton is a very young ward. It's right next to Tottenham Football Stadium, and I don't know if any of you have been around there, but it's surrounded by like teenagers, young people. So there's plenty of work that I can do to improve that community there. And yeah, I think just start small and you'll just gather momentum and you increase in confidence. And yeah, that's all I have to say, really. Just go ahead, do it. Go run.
That's a nice call to action as well. Thank you very much, Thomas. I think that's absolutely right. Can see as well people are sharing campaign links and things, and also if you just ping these to me after the session, I can make sure we share these round with wider membership as well. I'm going to go next to Panny for that question about what have you found as the most rewarding part of your campaign, and sort of what's inspired you to run for office.
Well, there's so much really. I think where I'm standing in Highgate, because it's such a marginal ward, and we've got like one seat is held by Sean Berry of the Greens, and the other two are held by Labour. We've sort of taken this attitude that we are greener than the Greens, and we are trying really hard to push them on the environment and trying really hard to be as environmentally friendly as possible. And one of the elements of our campaign, which has been really rewarding and really, really positive, is that in our ward we have the Mortimer Terrace Nature Reserve, which is a nature reserve that has a protection order over it at the moment, and you're not actually able to develop on it at all. And what we've had is we've had the owner of it try to essentially, I'm not sure what he wanted to do with it. I think he wanted to turn it into a car park because he wasn't able to put a building on it for whatever reason. And we've managed to then secure that with funds from Camden Council so it can be used as a green space for residents. And that's not actually completed yet, and that will complete soon. But that's something which is really positive that we were able to advocate for as candidates, and to kind of give it almost as a gift to the community. And people have spoken about cooperative values already. This is something which is going to be owned by the community, run by the community, and it's for the community. And I think that's the key of why we all run and why we're all running as Labour or Labour and cooperative. We're all there to kind of give back to our communities and kind of help them. So that was just a little example of that.
Definitely, thank you. And I think that's a really sort of great example, as you say, as well, of sort of what drove you and how you've been able to make that difference. And I'll just go to Ryan on this one before we go on to the next question.
Yeah, cheers, Laura. On the inspiration bits, I talked about some of this earlier, some of my experiences in my youth, specifically in Westminster. One thing that's always really irked me about here is that there was a study in 2019 the Uni of Manchester did. Westminster City Council is the least ethnically diverse council in the whole of the UK compared to the area it represents. Number one, 38% of people here aren't white, but only 13% of people on the council. This leads to all sorts of issues when it comes to policy making, when it comes to having diversity of views. And it's no surprise then that there's a lot of people there who feel left out of that decision making because they can't see people who represent them on the council. So that was another thing that really inspired me to run in Westminster. In terms of the most rewarding experience, I think is touching on what Marcus was saying, it's casework. You know, we've been walking these streets, knocking these doors now since early last summer. We started this super early because of how marginal it is. And we've been picking up casework from day one. They've got 3 Conservative councillors here, but pretty much all of these casework cases begin with, I spoke to my council and didn't help. So Ellie, myself, our third candidate, Dario, we step in, we help them, we get things done. There was one really rewarding one just last night where a man who several months ago, he has a council issued electric wheelchair. It broke one day in the street. He almost fell out. He, got home. He told me about this and the council dithered for months to fix it. We got involved. We got it fixed. I've not spoken to him since, but last night, one of our activists knocks on his door and he says to the activist, Ryan Jude, Labour Party have got my vote. He hadn't voted Labour before, but that's such a positive benefit. It's not about getting the vote. It's about seeing how happy he was in what we had done. And then you get to see the real power that we have as candidates, even at this point, but potentially as councillors in the future. This is then translated to our campaign in that we've got casework on pretty much every street in the ward. So hammering home to people what we're actually doing for them and where the councils aren't stepping in is another way that hopefully we'll be able to flip it. But yeah, the most rewarding part is actually just helping people, which is why I guess we're all here.
Definitely, and just getting things done as well. And I think that's a really, really strong point. What I think is quite interesting as well, as you sort of talked about progress during the campaign is how we can get these messages across and how we can speak to people. And as you say, getting people that haven't necessarily voted Labour before to vote for Labour. And I think that goes into the next question, which is about the tools that you found to be the most effective, really, to get your messages across to the local community. So Cai, I'll go to you first on that.
Sorry about that. Yeah, as I say, it's quite difficult to really get across to the largely student part of the ward any kind of message, really, because it's mostly halls. These are blocks of flats, and I think every campus has walked up to a block of flats with the same sense of dread as each other, and we do have trouble with that, and I think what some people would do is just give up, but I haven't had that attitude. I think it's important that we sort of think outside of the box and think of new ways of reaching those people. So social media has been big on that. The advantage of me being a student at the college is that I'm obviously got a few mutual followers, with lots of students. So what we can do is we can look at the electoral register and type people's names into Instagram or whatever, and we can reach people in that way instead. And the success of that, depends how much apathy there are with certain people. I mean, if some people receive a message from this political candidate that they've never met before, they might not answer it. But if they're really interested in the area and they're interested in voting for the first time or whatnot, you'll be able to get your messages across in a way that simply trying to get through these flats really works. As far as normal residents are concerned as well, I think knocking on doors is an incredibly important thing. Even in seats where it's largely unwinnable, you can sort of solidify your place as a second place candidate, more or less, if you go around and you just meet as many people as possible. They might have the largest houses in the world, but if they've met you, they're just that much more likely to vote for you, because it really shows that you're putting in the time to represent potentially your local community. So I think that's incredibly important in getting your messages across. It's much better than just a leaflet. Yeah,
definitely. And I think that kind of personal connection piece as well that you mentioned, Cai, is something that's really important. And Nicki, I'm going to go to you next on that same question about the sort of tools that you found has been most effective to get through to people, I guess.
So for us, we found it's a bit of a mix. So the most effective way essentially is knocking on people's doors and asking them if they've got any issues that they'd like to tell you about. And you'll get a mix of some people saying, no, everything is hunky-dory, and there'll be some people who are like, where do I start? And they've got a list of things which they've tried to get sorted out, and they've just not had any luck with it. It could be people using their street as a rat run. It could be people leaving litter on the corner of the street, which is where their house happens to be. It could be any number of things. And I think a lot of people, they just want to feel like they're listened to. A lot of people do. So it's really nice that we just like that we've made the effort to actually go to them, and we're not expecting them to come to us all of the time. If we're going to be accessible to people, the first step is to be visible to people. And the other thing that we've done a lot of in Enfield is like using social media to campaign selfies are always great, but the other thing that we're trying to do is show ourselves to be visible in the community as well. So whether that's taking part in like a litter picking or attending like a community event. So I attended like a Turkish Ellie event quite recently, and it's just good for like the local community to be able to see you. They can put a name to your face. They can say, okay, look up, this is the someone who's prepared to like spend their time and energy to just like take part in like a local celebration or things like that. And we've also got quite a lot of community groups as well. So I've been reaching out to them in order to make links with them, so that because those people are they're a lot of them, they're quite invested in the community, and a lot of people see them as like a community leader who they can go to on certain issues. So if we've got those people, that then indirectly gives us a link with a particular part of the community which might be quite hard to reach. So those people know that their local this is their local representative. This is someone who they can go to with issues either individually or as a collective. So it's a bit of a range in Enfield, but we're utilising like all the tools that we've got, and all tools that we find quite effective, just so that people can know who we are and know that we care.
I think that point as well, Nicki, about like furthering name recognition is something that, as you say, is really, really important, and making sure people are aware that, you are there to represent the community. And I know Ellie has sort of been doing some interesting work on that as well. So I go to you next time, Ellie.
Yeah, sure. So I promise I'm not a complete Luddite, but I wanted to answer this question as a plug for some kind of non-digital ways of connecting with the electorate. So we're super duper active on Twitter, but for us, it's definitely much more of a tool to mobilise other Labour activists and members, as opposed to actually connecting with voters. 90% of our likes and retweets are from other Labour activists and members. And we like to put our campaigning photos on there, and other activists will therefore see that, feel guilty for not coming, and come along next time. And that's effectively the extent of our reach on Twitter. So I definitely wouldn't rely on that as a tool to connect with voters, as it's way too much of an echo chamber for that. We do also have a Facebook page, but similarly does not get masses of interaction unless we pay to boost our posts. As understandably, voters aren't going to search on Facebook for the local council or candidates Facebook page. It's way too niche. So the way we've largely used Facebook is to join lots of other local community pages and directly comment kind of as yourself on those posts. So for example, I'm on a local residents association group for the estate near me, and when they had issues with kind of wind damaging their properties, I was the first one there commenting on there with helpful links to the council and places they could report the damage, which was a much better way to directly interact with people, as opposed to trying to signpost people to your kind of central Facebook page. But for me, the kind of best way by far, bar kind of actually door knocking and ringing people to engage with people, is to kind of use those analog methods. We've used a lot of targeted direct mail on really specific local issues, and we've tried to get things in the local paper and in local kind of residents associations, magazines and publications. And whenever we do either of those, we always get people reaching out to us directly via email. And that has been by far the best way we've had to connect with people, bar, like I say, actually knocking on someone's door and saying hello.
And I think it's really interesting, as you say, Ellie, that actually those kind of tools can be just as valuable. And I think Twitter, as you say, definitely has a place, but it does seem to be much more sort of activist based, and it isn't where the electorate is. So I think kind of, tapping into those tools that you've been able to use sounds like it's been really effective as well. And just want to make sure we can get round to everyone. So I think I'm going to go ahead to one of our final questions, but if anybody here does want to ask a question that hasn't already, please do post it in the chat, and we can get to that before we wrap up as well. But I think this is going to be very interesting to hear our candidates' different perspectives on this. And I think particularly this is a really useful session to get some insight into what it's like to run for office as a young person. I know lots of young Fabians that watch this back might be thinking about doing this themselves in the future as well. So I want to ask all of you, if you had to give one piece of advice to a young person to encourage them to run in an election, what would you say? And I'm going to start with Finley first.
Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I answered this question in my blog piece that I did for Young Fabians. My advice is a bit of a cliche, but it's go for it, because I think it's such a fantastic experience to put your Labour / Fabians values into practice. And even if it's in a tricky ward like mine, you can still develop experience as a campaigner. I've created my own campaign literature. I've organised my own team of volunteers. It's been my own campaign, organising my own community visits, because rightfully the organisers in Harrow have been focusing resources elsewhere. So it's been a real learning curve experience for me. So for that reason alone, go for it.
I like that as a nice positive sharp call to action as well, Finley. Thank you very much. And I'm going to go next to Liam with the same question.
So also in a blog that I did for the Young Fabians, definitely agree with Finley on the go for it, and and to kind of like continue on from there to almost not necessarily worry, even if you're in a what can be constituted a pretty tough area to win over, or a tough ward to win over. Like I'm in my mid-20s, but one of the things that is really, really good in Camden with our team of Labour candidates here is that we're a much younger cohort on average than what has gone before. And I happen to meet with there's a 19-year-old on our team who's standing for election in an unwinnable ward, but from the feedback that she has been getting, she's given a really, really good account of both herself, of her party on the doorstep as well, and at least from that, even if you don't ultimately win that time, you've had the experience of what running is like to be able to go again the next time around. I think ultimately the best thing to do is to have a chat with an existing council or an existing elected representative you might know, just about what kind of things are generally involved, and what you feel you might be able to contribute to your local council in terms of being a councillor, because I probably concur with everybody on this chat. We need more young voices, particularly in local government. I mean, the reason why not enough housing is being built, the reason why action on the environment isn't nowhere near deep or fast enough, the reason why we can't get the transport, the jobs, the inclusive economy, the inclusive society that we need, is because for far too long decisions at both a local and a national level have been taken by the same old people with the same old attitudes and the same old beliefs. And it's really time to shake it up a little bit. And so many young people, both candidates and here on the call, are going to be part of that. So definitely go for it. And if you want to know a little bit more, just in terms of the process, and and also kind of like what being a councillor ultimately entails, I definitely go for a coffee or go for a chat with an existing councillor who you might know, because they can provide some really, really good insights to complement that enthusiasm.
I love that, Liam, and I think that point about knowledge transfer is something that's really valuable as well. And obviously, we have a big network in the Young Fabians, so definitely want to make sure members feel they can definitely take advantage of that. I'm going to go to Marcus Storm next to ask the same question.
Yes, or you can come and chat to one of us, of course. We've all given out Twitters. Liam's Twitter is also, he also posts his Wordle scores. He's quite good at it, I'm afraid. So you have to deal with that. Yes, representation is a big thing. I think, especially as I was just posting in the chat, right? It was a lot of transient people, a lot of young people, renters who move in and out of place, don't feel ownership of places, right? And if you want to speak up as one of those people, or a different demographic that you feel like you understand, for me, again, it's also British East Asian community as well, and we have a very diverse range of people on this call as well. I would sum it up as go for it. I got asked by my branch many times. I had to put a lot of thought into it. A lot of people had to convince me, but and there are differences between standing in a marginal and unwinnable and safe seat. So you've got to figure out what you want to get out of it. And a lot of things what we've talked about in this call is about the changes that we'd like to see if you get on. But in a marginal or an unwinnable seat, you can have a great experience as well. You can get lots of exposure in the marginal. You can run a great campaign if you love that. And in an unwinnable, as Liam just said, we have a fantastic colleague in Belsize. I think she's, which is a heavy Tory. It's going to be Tory when the turnout for locals is like 70%, right? So, but you can build a name for yourself. You can define success in a way that's maybe different from winning outright, but you can still succeed. And that's I highly encourage that. The more people we have interested involved in politics, the better.
Completely agree with that, Mark, and I think that's a really good point as well about making sure, as you say, that we've got people of all sorts of different interests and professions reflected in what we're doing in public life, because we want to make sure that it's also reflecting what's going on in our communities as well. I'm also going to go next to Ryan, if that's okay.
Yeah, my one piece of advice is kind of a rehash of the others, but in slightly different words, and that's that you won't know all the answers, so just throw yourself into it and get involved. I can be super neurotic kind of thing where if I'm going to go for like a selection or an interview, I need to make sure I know everything. And I realized quite quickly that with the campaign that it's impossible to know that, and the best way to learn is by actually doing it. So if you're a young person thinking of running, don't be afraid because you think that you're not good enough, you don't know what you need, you don't know what it entails. You will learn by doing it, and that is by far the best way to do it.
I love that, and I think that kind of active learning point is really important as well. And we'll go to Kashmire next.
Yeah, as I've mentioned on the blog, and as everyone has also mentioned, absolutely, if you think the opportunity is waiting, you should absolutely seek to take it. Not least as a result of how important local politics and local government can be to your lives, and knowing that through the power that they have, and there is great opportunity there. And even if I am for the second year in a row running in, within what is within what is part of the safest Tory bit of the city, and that my chances of winning are obviously not as high as I could dream. It's still an extremely worthwhile experience, and I had huge fun being able to stuff all those leaflets through those doors in the neighbouring ward last year, and seeing that in the end we did increase the vote. Yes, it was by 45 votes, but we increased the vote, and I felt really satisfying in itself, and it did very much develop me as to obviously not just dusting off the campaign cobwebs from the last few years, but also realising as to what you've got to do in these things and how crafty you can also get within the realms of campaigning, whether it's, say, on the doorstep or by giving people a call, or even obviously through social media. So it's very much not just a thing that I think makes the bones stick up a bit more, but also I think it develops, my mind has developed me, not least as an autistic person, massively. And that's something I very much think will be the case again this year, even if my campaigns are bit on the different side with how work is and so forth. But definitely go for it.
I love the going for it is coming up as a regular theme as well. I'll go to Ellie next.
My piece of advice would similarly be, don't worry about not having enough experience or the right experience to run. The kind of experience, unique perspective and energy you'll bring to the table is undoubtedly more than enough. Nevertheless, if you do want to increase your experience before your next election, you should come down to Westminster and we will show you the ropes.
I love that, and I was going to say, I think we're hoping to organise a Young Fabians campaign down in Westminster as well for Ryan and Ellie, which should be fantastic. So looking to get that in the diary. I'll go to Thomas next, if that's okay.
Yeah, I guess it's just going to be another recycled diatribe of just do it, believe in yourself. You're young, you got your whole life ahead of you, go do it. But honestly, never doubt your ability. The best way to learn something is to do it. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, with what everybody said, I learned because one of my friends at school, we went to the same state school together, Chase Community Comprehensive, and that's actually where the same school where Bambos Charalambos went to. So we've got quite a rich history of Labour at the moment, which is quite encouraging. But yeah, I just caught up with him and I said, listen, I'm so interested in what you're up to. And he showed me the ropes, and he's been a great mentor. And when I got to meet the wider Enfield Labour family in my CLP, and I met Nicki on the call with me, and now we're both candidates. It's just a wonderful thing to do. So yeah, winnable, not winnable, who cares? You're just going to have a great experience, and again, meeting new people and solving problems. Surely there's nothing more worthwhile to do than to solve someone's problem through democracy and for an organization that encourages equality and fairness above all. And as young people, we have a thing or two to say about that, especially after 12 years of housing crisis, austerity, treble tuition fees, the list goes on, student debt, the climate crisis. There's plenty to be angry about, but don't despair, just get involved and put yourself forward as a candidate. Go for it.
Again, I love that, and I think that's so inspiring, and also glad, Thomas, as you say, that yourself and Nicki managed to, meet beforehand, and then you ended up running as candidates together. And I think that's why, the Young Fabians is such a great mechanism, and it's so great to have all of you on today. And with that in mind, I'm going to go to you next, Nicki, with your advice.
So I'm trying not to repeat what's already been said, but I think one of the things that come across on the I just realised I was on still failing on after 2 years. So one of the things I come across on the doorstep quite a lot, particularly from people who would be from marginalised groups, is that local government isn't the people personally, and that's why they don't engage. And my answer to them is always that if you don't engage, it's not going to be people like you. If people want to see more, of a variety of councillors and a variety of ultimately, if you don't have young people putting themselves forward, then we're never going to have a government that is representative of people who look like you or sound like you, who's brought similar circumstances to you. And I think the other thing I would say is that if you ever doubt your ability to run for council, just have a look at the government that we've got at the minute and look at the people who are members of parliament. I just think if Boris Johnson could be the Prime Minister, then you can definitely be a councillor. And I think it's safe to say that a lot of our members in particular are far more qualified to be councillors than some Conservatives who are elected councillors. So yeah, you definitely can't be as awful.
Thank you, Nicki, and I think that's a very important point as well. And I think the very low bar of the government means that I know there's so many people across Young Fabians that would make fantastic candidates, and hopefully can follow in all of your footsteps as well. Panny, we're going to go to you next on your advice for people looking to run.
So I guess everyone's kind of said it, but just be a bit like Nike, just do it. Like you look around you, and we're a generation where those of us who are living in London or another major city will struggle to buy our own home. We've got cost of living crisis, we've got high rent, and we're facing things which no other generation has really. And that kind of puts us in a unique position in many ways to be able to advocate for people and to be able to be the change that we want to see. I had something else to say, and I've said sort of completely slipped my mind now. But that's the thing. When you're a young person, people will underestimate you and they will look at you like you can't do this. But the reality is you can. You look at like council cohorts across the country, and they're overwhelmingly old retirees. They're overwhelmingly white. They're overwhelmingly men. And we need more women standing. We need more BAME people standing, and we need more young people standing. So it's great to see kind of such diversity. And I know in Camden, as Liam mentioned, we're especially good at this. I think we've got 40% BAME and 50% female, which pretty much reflects the diversity of what Camden is. But so many more councils and so many more Labour groups kind of need to do more to encourage young people to stand, and encourage people from minority groups to stand, and encourage women to stand. And I think being the change we want to see and taking that step is so important.
Thank you, Panny. And I think, yeah, that's really important as well, as you say, about just taking that step and making sure that you are, you know, if you feel like you're not being represented, making sure that you're kind of coming forward and representing your community. I think that's really important. And then last but not least, we'll go to Cai.
Yeah, thank you. My one piece of advice would be just never let anybody tell you that you're too young to do it, and give it a go. If you think you can do it, you probably can. So you should go for it. My agent, in fact, yesterday told me, and he's a county councillor as well, that, you know, he was in some place on the other side of the county, you know, not anywhere near Runnymede, but somebody told him, "Oh Christ, your candidate here is quite young." And you know, people on the doorstep who say, "Oh, you're quite young," and they almost assume that as an 18-year-old standing to be a councillor for one of the two big political parties, that I must have some ambition someday of sitting on the front benches of the House of Commons, and that must be my motive for doing this. And it's, you know, it's completely wrong, and they suggest that this is all just some sort of game to me. Just prove them wrong, you know. And as well, that's why a lot of people argue for the voting age to be raised. It's because young people just don't vote, and they don't think that we're competent enough to understand these issues. So prove them wrong, because we're, you know, it's absolutely a fiction, you know, those ideas. So yeah, don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it.
I think that's such an inspiring point, Cai, and I think that's so important as well, as you say, about making sure that we are amplifying young people's voices. And, you know, young people are politically active and not being told that we're apathetic and we're not caring. And I think, you know, the fact that all of you are running is, you know, a real testament to the fact about young people care about their communities, and, you know, we want to shape it for the better and undo the mess of previous generations, to be honest. And I think, you know, everything that I've heard today from all of you has been so inspiring, and I'm sure there's lots of young Fabians but will watch this back as well and will take similar steps themselves, as I know some of you did this year after hearing from last year's candidates roundtable as well. And so I just want to say a massive thank you to all of you for joining the session today. I think it's been such an interesting discussion, hearing all of your experiences, and regardless of sort of where you're based, but there are a lot of commonalities, and, you know, that we've got such fantastic people that really want to do the best for their communities, and, as you say, are absolutely running for the right reasons to make a positive change. And as Panny was saying about being the change that we want to see, and I think that's something that's really key. If anybody has some spare time for the rest of this evening, we'll do a quick plug for a Welsh Fabians Economy and Finance Network event that's coming up at 7:30, which is about sustainability of the Welsh economy. But otherwise, I just want to say again, a huge thank you to all of you for your time. If you can send me through any links to your relevant campaign pages or anything you want to share, I know blogs and things were mentioned, please do, because we can make sure that we also can share these across some of our Young Fabian social media channels as a collective to follow up from this event as well, moving forwards. And I think it's been really inspiring for me. So thank you very much to all of you for joining. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Laura.